Hello, and welcome to today's episode of Monster Island Radio. I'm Ben, and of course, I'm joined by the ever-entertaining...
Graham.
Yes.
Am I supposed to be endorsing that compliment?
I liked how there was a big hesitation, and then the most lackluster Graham
so
followed it.
You're going to make me sound like I think I'm super entertaining now, I think. But that's your estimation. Well, no thanks, I guess.
Right, today, we're not talking about Godzilla. We're talking about King Kong.
Wow.
Specifically, the original 1933 King Kong. So we're going all the way back. So, I don't know why, but I feel weirdly out of my depth talking about King Kong.
I think, the reason we're doing this, I guess you could say, is because we're going through the Showa era, like, more or less. We're only 2 movies in. We're only 2 movies in, but the next one's going to be King Kong versus Godzilla, right? Godzilla versus King Kong. I can't remember. It's always Godzilla versus in this first bit, isn't it? And then
this next film is King Kong versus Godzilla.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah.
So we wanted to obviously do King Kong, but I know what you mean because we sort of know Godzilla, and obviously the original Godzillas are like very like big, important movies culturally, but few. Even in the pantheon of like kaiju movies, outside of that, I would say few movies loom as large culturally as King Kong.
Exactly.
So I think that's where it's like, we've got to talk about it and act like we've got something to say. I think we have some things to say though, so it should be all right.
Yeah.
I guess we're approaching it as Godzilla fans, so that's its own sort of take.
Yes. Yeah. So this was directed by Merian C. Cooper and Ernest Schoedsack. I had to look up how to pronounce his name. And I think that's right. I heard 2 pronunciations, and that seemed the most common. So we'll go with Schoedsack. Now, it had extensive drafts and rewrites and contributors before it ever actually got filmed. So there's a whole team behind the success of this. But it really was the brainchild of Cooper, mostly. Like he came up with the story, he was the producer and one of the directors.
Obsessive by all accounts.
Yes, exactly. So the duties were split, and Cooper, he was on the miniatures side of things, and Schoedsack was on dialogue because, for exactly what you said, Cooper was like quite meticulous and slow paced.
So he's got an effects director and then like an actors director, basically.
That's exactly it. Yeah. So he was quite meticulous, and like that suited that kind of filmmaking, and Schoedsack was quite quick and quite snappy.
More personal, perhaps, if he was with the actors. I don't know.
I would assume so, because, if you got someone who's meticulous and slow like that, I imagine that'd be quite frustrating. Like, Kubrick as an example. It can be a frustrating experience for an actor. So if you've got someone who's quite snappy and efficient, I imagine that's quite a blessing. So here's a refresher, if anyone needs reminding of one of the most famous movie plots of all time. Filmmaker Carl Denham ships out a crew, and I'm assuming a single cast member, who is Ann Darrow, to an uncharted island in Indonesia to shoot a unique adventure film. When they find the island, they run into natives who are planning to sacrifice a female tribe member to a creature called Kong. The natives halt the ritual and tell the crew that they want Anne as a sacrifice instead, as she's so beautiful. After the crew refuse, the natives kidnap her at night and commence the ritual again, with Anne instead. And then Kong appears. He kidnaps Anne, so a group of sailors from the ship give chase to Kong to save her, but most of them are killed by the dinosaurs and creatures that live on the island, except for Jack Driscoll, who eventually manages to break her free. They head back to Denham and the survivors who are still residing in the village, but Kong breaks through the barrier to the village to get Anne back. Denham then knocks out Kong with a gas bomb and decides to bring him back alive to New York as an exhibition. And we flash forward and see Denham, Anne and Jack ready to unveil Kong to the world. As reporters take photos of Kong, the flashes enrage him and he breaks free from his restraints. He finds Anne and then ascends the Empire State Building. With nowhere else to go, armed biplanes have him cornered and shoot him down, where he ultimately falls to his death, with Denham declaring, "It was beauty that killed the beast."
Well,
it wasn't.
Well, he says beauty killed the beast. He doesn't say that. killed the beast.
It's
Famously.
Beauty that killed the beast. Yeah, wasn't it that? I think because like they were saying, oh, it's the airplanes that killed him, and there's like, no, it's Beauty that.
But this is the thing: is the quote is Beauty killed the beast. 'Twas Beauty that killed the beast, or 'twas Beauty killed the beast. I think it's hard to say. Oh yeah, it's here. I've got it written down. No, it wasn't the airplanes. It was Beauty killed the beast. And I remember this because the grammatical inaccuracy is like this kind of faux romanticism that they.
Yes.
And it comes across so like clunky.
I feel like that was such a misfire, that final line.
Here's the thing though, and I was going to bring this up, but years and years ago I watched a documentary, or like, it wasn't a documentary, it was one of these like listicle shows that used to be quite popular in like the early noughties. And it was like the AFI top 100 movie quotes of all time.
Right.
And it was Beauty Killed the Beast was like number 2 or number 1.
Right.
And I hadn't seen King Kong at this point. This was when I was quite young. I was just like, what a crap quote. But I think it is held in quite high esteem as this kind of like lofty sort of allegorical sort of like, oh, what is the true meaning behind this?
I find that surprising.
I kind of find it a bit like there's not really much in it. I think if you stretch
it's
it,
so
you
forced.
Yeah, it does feel forced. But I think you can make it mean that a standard of beauty that like deems Kong like not like worthy sort of ends up getting him killed basically, but that isn't what happens.
No.
Or is it that his lust for Anne Darrow leads him into a situation where he gets killed and therefore Beauty killed the beast sort of thing?
That's what I think it is, but what that does is it alleviates them of any responsibility.
Yeah, that's the thing as well. It's just like, well, actually, if you hadn't brought him here, so... But yeah, I mean, most of the dialogue in this is clunky by today's standards, so it's probably not a fair criticism anyway.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah, I first saw King Kong, I think I must have been 7 or 8, maybe.
Really?
Yeah, something like that, because I seem to remember it was on at my grandparents' house. Now, my memory is really, really hazy here. So I seem to remember seeing it at their house. And then I also watched the 1976 one, either that same day or like shortly after at their house.
Maybe there was a marathon.
Maybe, that's
TMC
what
or something.
Yeah, I think it might have been something like that. And the one that stood out to me most was the 76 one.
Was that because it was like more modern, or? Yeah,
well, I think the ending mostly, like when you see Kong laying on the ground, that seemed to have more of an impact than the one in 33 did. Like you couldn't really see him laying on the ground. I don't know, because it just seemed to end quite suddenly, I thought.
Yeah, as old movies tend to do.
Yeah. When did you first see it? Because I say I saw it. I might not have.
I guess
my memory is so hazy. I might have only seen 76, but I do recall knowing some of the scenes already. So
I think knowing some of the scenes is a pretty common experience for anybody, like, in our time, to be you just sort of get the gist of King Kong without even seeing it. I guess what you're saying is like you can watch it as a child, but you don't really see it until you've got like the wherewithal to sort of understand what's going on.
Yeah.
I didn't see King Kong until it was 2005 and the Peter Jackson one was coming out.
Right.
Because I was a big Lord of the Rings fan, still am, and I was really excited for that Peter Jackson remake. So I went down to HMV and they had a box set of like a collection of Kong movies, and it was the 33 one. I think they have Son of Kong on there. I can't remember. It's in the other room. I can't look at it. But they also have the 76 one, and they have King Kong Escapes, which is the Japanese like one where there's a robot Kong in it.
Yeah.
So I marathoned like those 33, 76 and Escapes.
Yeah.
And then I was so weary from Kong that I never went to see the 2005 one. I never went to see Peter Jackson's. I've seen it since. I didn't get to see it in the cinema. I had a week off and I think I was under the weather and I've been watching King Kong for like a week. And I was like, okay, I'm going to go watch this movie. And the Peter Jackson one, as we will probably one day discuss, is like 3 hours long.
It's hefty, isn't it? And it
is,
which I've not seen.
Yeah, like you say, we know the story, so in that context, this is really by the by. But I first saw it on DVD in about 2005.
Right. Okay.
And that I think was before I'd seen the Godzilla 54.
54. Yeah.
So I wasn't really into the big kaiju thing at that point, really. I mean, it's always interested me.
Okay.
I've always like been sort of like interested in Godzilla since the 98 one. But I hadn't really sought out the movies as such, as it's much easier to do these days. But that's the DVD I watched yesterday. It's the same copy that I bought back in 2005.
Okay. Yeah, it's kind of funny. Like, it's really started the kaiju genre. Like, you know, it's like, you know, an overinflated monster, you know, terrorizes the city. But it's weird. I never really think of it as a kaiju film. I think of it more as like a monster movie, and I wonder if that's because it's an American-made thing. Maybe, I'm not sure.
It goes for the horror elements quite strong in the third act. You know, in the New York part, it's very much like this is a horror movie. So it doesn't feel like. I mean, this is the thing: is that you can apply any number of comparisons or allegories to King Kong, but I think it is very clear that it's just made as like a straight action movie, special effects movie. You know, it's not trying to do the thing that Godzilla did, where it's just like. Yeah, this is a effects action movie, but we are saying this monster is the nuclear attack, basically, and that has like a meaning. Whereas King Kong, you can imbue it with meaning.
Yes,
and I think there is depth there, obviously, but it's mostly significant as an effects piece. I think.
I completely agree,
and I think that's the key thing that we're always looking for in the kaiju movies, the Godzilla movies. It's not just that there's good action, which is obviously what we're hungry for, but that there is some sort of like reason behind what's happening. So I think that's probably why it feels a bit different, because it's purely like King Kong is a horrific creature. You know, that's the first thing, rather than it being like, yes, he is a horrific creature, but also he stands for this thing. Yeah.
So Cooper, he used to make jungle documentaries. And there was this fascination in the 20s and 30s, you know, with the invention of, you know, moving pictures. You know, like you could see lands that you'd never seen before. You know, you could bring otherwise unseen places into, you know.
This is like the birth of modern tourism, really.
Essentially, yeah. And then he saw in New York City, they had basically imported some Komodo dragons. And he was always fascinated by them from what he'd read and things like that. But he found it interesting how quickly these, like, you know, impressive beasts died as soon as they came to New York and were in captivity. They just
the climate wasn't for them, I guess.
I guess that was it, and maybe they weren't being
couldn't cut it in the Big Apple.
Yeah. I guess so. So you know, they just died, and he found that quite like interesting. So that was where I think that's where the idea came from. You know, you bring this beast from an unknown place to your home like that, you know, what's going to happen? But I guess, well, I mean, I think it, if we're going to imbue it with a message, I think that, you know, King Kong displays Cooper's reverence of, you know, keeping things in their natural habitat.
Right.
You know, I would say if we're going to look for a message there, I'd say that maybe that's the one that's under the surface.
I've heard this thing of like, it's about nature versus the modern world, and
I don't necessarily believe that's the sole reason.
Well, I feel like that's a really good, you know, flag to pitch in the movie, like once it's done. But I feel like it's pretty clear that the origin is like, let's make a big gorilla movie kind of thing. There's definitely like meaning in there, but I just don't feel like it was there when they started the production. It was like, oh, you know, it means there's. So maybe that's a bit reductive, but I feel like this is just like a crazy action movie before it's any sort of poetic anything really to me.
Yeah, because I think it's trying to tick some boxes, like you know, it wants the action and the special effects and stuff, and then also the obligatory romance.
Yeah,
which it was quite interesting that they kind of poked fun at that, because I think in the movie itself.
It's like a art imitates life thing, basically, isn't it?
Yeah. You know, he was, you know, because apparently the director got flack for never having any romance in his movies. Mm-hmm. So, you know, they directly called that out and then did it. And it's kind of funny that
Devon has the same complaint, basically. He's like, they're making me do it.
Yes, yeah, exactly. And it's funny that the like promotion for the movie still had the romantic angle.
Right.
Like it was meant to be like, it was kind of, the posters and stuff were pitched as, I can't remember if it was Anne in Jack's arms or if it was in Denham's arms or something like that. whoever was more famous at the time, I'm not sure. But it was meant to be this whole kind of, it was pitched as being a romantic thing, a romantic horror in a way, I suppose.
They basically still market movies like that now.
Do you think?
Kind of, yeah, because even though like you don't see like, well, I've not actually seen it. I'm assuming you've seen this new Batman movie, right?
No, actually, I haven't.
I can't use that.
3 hours long.
Yeah, there you go. I don't know. I mean, well, let's say Dark Knight Rises. Then there's no poster of like Catwoman and Batman like embracing, right? But the sexual tension between Batman and Catwoman is it's part of the appeal. It's like why the movie's like gonna, people want to go see it, and even if that's not like the number one reason, they weave in with all these big movies. Like, you've got the explosions, and you've got the intrigue and the espionage, and there's the sex, and so even now it's like you have to tick boxes, like you're saying. It's like and that's where I feel like even in 1933 you can see the production gears turning in the movie. Like even as early as that in cinema, it's like, oh, you've got to have this and you've got to have that, and it feels very mechanical in the first hour of this movie is kind of like setting up things, which I think I don't know if sensibilities were as such then. It's so early on in cinema, they probably could have done away with a lot of it at the time and got to the point quicker. But I guess they felt like they needed all that stuff. Yeah,
I mean, they had the Hollywood kiss as well on the book. Yeah, exactly. You know what? I didn't know who any of these actors were, in all honesty. I've probably seen them in other things. So we had like Robert Armstrong as Carl Denham. I don't know. I'm going to sound like a total idiot, but I don't know who these people are. What else are they? Do you know? Have you seen them in anything else?
No, I know them from King Kong, and I've heard like Robert Armstrong chucked around, and I know like Fay Wray was in like a handful of other things, but this movie's 90 years old. I don't think we're expected to have like the ins and outs of these actors' careers down.
I'm sure some people will probably expect us to, but who knows?
They probably turned off for now.
Yeah, maybe. And you got Fay Wray as Anne Darrow, who my assumption is that's a direct reference to Clarence Darrow, the defense attorney in the Scopes monkey trial. I think, I'm pretty sure, like I could be wrong.
What is Scopes monkey trial?
That's where a southern state, I think it might be Tennessee, I might be wrong. They had, it was essentially Ned Flanders versus science. Like, people were getting pissed off that evolution was being taught in schools.
Oh, right.
And then he was a defense attorney for the right to teach evolution.
They can't.
Yeah. So
there's places doing that now in America.
Well, yeah, this is an ongoing issue.
Yeah, nothing ever changes.
And you got Bruce Cabot as Jack Driscoll, and then Frank Riker as Captain Engelhorn. Now, the only reason I kind of mention him just because I was kind of curious about one aspect of this, where he spoke their language. So he's saying it's based on, like, it sounded like the Nias Islanders language, which is like an Indonesian island. And I was like, oh, is this a real thing? So I did some research, and someone else had done the hard work for me. I found their website where they went through all this. They were basically saying that it's a nonsense language. Like, right. There are some aspects of it which are loosely based on Malay language. Like, there's a couple of borrowed words here and there, but the rest of it's just gibberish. Yes. And when this film had to go through when the production code administration came into effect, they had to run it by them and say, like, well, this is the translation, but like it was still nothing. Yeah. So they had a bunch of words that didn't mean anything, and they wrote their own translation, and they were like, "Yep, that'll do." But Ray Harryhausen, he went to Nias Island, and he said some of the words from the film to islanders there, and they just looked at him like, "What are you talking about?"
Not surprised.
Yeah, so it meant absolutely nothing. But yeah, I thought that was quite interesting. Yeah, during the production of this, Fay Wray apparently was doing 24-hour shifts at one point.
Yes, I heard about this. Yeah, they were making another movie at night at the same time as making one in the day, right?
Yes. Well, so they were doing. It was called the Most Dangerous Game, and that also had Robert Armstrong in. But they were making test footage for Kong at the same time. Oh, I see. So yeah, so she was doing that as well. So crunch culture alive and well back then.
Oh, well, Hollywood invented it.
Well, there you go. Yeah.
So,
Great. Good stuff. But, so these characters, straight out the gate, I found all of them painfully unlikable. And and the flagrant sexism I found a bit too much to bear. Anne was okay. Like, she was fine. But it was all this kind of, women are a bother just being around. Oh, they're made that way. And then Driscoll later was like, oh, I love you. But, but you hate women. Yeah, I do. Well, what the fuck? Like,
it's not like he doesn't learn a lesson, especially that the women are all right or whatever.
No, he still hates women except that one. Mate. And there was one scene in particular.
Yeah.
It was right near the start. So as they kind of set sail, he accidentally hits her in the face.
Yes.
Like, because he's like, he's gesturing.
He's just waving his arms around.
He's like, oh yeah, pull that rope up here.
They're trying to characterize him as like a big O to an extent, I think. Of like, not well. Just trying to,
That scene, maybe that's why, but it was deliberately included.
Yes.
And I can't help but question why. And what it reminded me of, it's not quite the same, but there's this kind of overt sexism in movies, which really frustrates me. And now there's one other example I could think of. I mean, there are countless examples really, but there's a scene in Twister. Have you seen Twister?
Yeah. Well, I rewatched Twister not that long ago, and I was surprised how sexist it is.
Okay, so do you remember the bit at the end where they end up being cornered in that little shack, and they have to tie themselves to this metal pipe thing?
Yes.
So that exchange they have at that moment is so strange because Helen Hunt, she gets a strap and says, let's use this. And then Bill Paxton goes, no, that's no good. Let's use this.
Right.
And then they use his strap.
Right.
Now, why? Why did that exchange exist?
It's a microaggression, as they call them, isn't it? Where it's like
100% is, because like, for starters, they could have written it that Helen Hunt's strap was fine, or they could have excluded that bit and just gone with his strap from the get-go.
Yeah, but they include this thing of like, oh, he knows better than her, so we have to show that.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
I see what you're saying, yeah.
And like, I feel like this hit in the face was a similar kind of thing.
I feel like it's there. Not that I'm defending any of the sexism in this movie. I mean, I will say, it's a very old film, so I'm not really going to try and contest any of its social messaging. But I think if it's there for any reason, it's to show that Anne Darrow can take a hit and is a bit tough. And therefore, when Kong kidnaps her, she sort of, I mean, she just spends the whole time screaming. Nothing really, happens as such. But she's sort of like, she can take it. She's strong.
Right, okay.
Another woman might be immediately like, they might just die of fright sort of thing. But Anne's a bit more like,
Yeah, she wanted to stay on the deck afterwards and all of that.
Part of this sexism is just like, Carl Denham just goes and picks up some homeless woman, basically. He goes to the homeless shelter for women, and he's like, oh, I don't like any of these women, they're not pretty enough.
Yes.
And then he just happens upon Anne Darrow actually stealing some food because she's so desperate. So she can't really say no to his, his job offer to come on this, a 6-week voyage there and back to film a movie, which he knows nothing about.
Yeah.
And there's like, it's totally absurd. Like, none of the characters, anything they do, it doesn't really make sense. It's all just in service of like making the film happen. And I think if you accept that as either like, oh, it's dated, or this is just the kind of movie it is, it becomes a lot easier to watch. Like, we don't care like if these, if the sailor and the actress get together, or if the movie gets made or doesn't get made. It's just like, when are we going to get to like King Kong going around the jungle, ripping off dinosaurs' heads and climbing up Empire State Building? That's what you're there for. So I feel like they sort of do themselves a disservice by like, you can see the filmmakers like know that, and they tell you that when you're saying like, oh, they are complaining within the movie about being forced to put romance in. We know that they don't care about it, so it's not well executed. So you have to kind of give yourself over to the movie. It's like, even the filmmakers know that all we want is to see King Kong doing King Kong stuff. So let's just sit tight, tick these boxes, and we'll get there. And once you do get to the Kong stuff, it's pretty much no dialogue, all action for the most of the last half of it. So it does sort of pay off in its own way. But yeah, it's difficult to swallow. Like, well, in a way it's difficult to swallow, but it's a good historical document, I think. If you wanted to show people like, this is just how sexist. I mean, things are still sexist now. Not enough has changed, really, in the modern world. But you can see, like, in the 1930s, it was proper,
this was okay.
There's this real mainstream stuff here, and like I think it's the way that Ann Darrow just takes it. And you can assume with a modern eye, like, you know, speaking as males, you can see, like, well, obviously she's like fucking furious probably about every single thing that gets said to her, makes her like boil with rage. But she acts like it doesn't affect her because that's just like what women are made to do. So yeah, in a way, it's quite interesting from that perspective.
It's I mean, it's strange that one of the main and final screenwriters was Ruth Rose.
Yes,
she was married to Schoedsack, and you'd think that kind of, you know, a final, you know, gloss over by a woman might eliminate some of that, but
who knows what it looked like before?
Oh, you know what? That's a good point.
This could be the better version of it.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely right.
It's far from unwatchable though. Like it's disconcerting, but like
you're right. Now, I really had trouble. I watched it twice, mainly because I forgot some of the first section. I need to remind myself for this. But the first time watching it, honestly, I wasn't really enjoying myself because of that, and that really irked me more than it probably should have. I don't know, and I found that really put a sour taste in my mouth for the rest of the film, even up until the end. And when we had that final line, you know, beauty killed. Was it?
Beauty killed the beast. It was beauty killed the beast.
Yeah. I was just like, yeah, fuck you. And I was just like, not obviously that extreme. You know, I was just a bit like, meh. I was very lukewarm on it, like despite the better aspects of the film. But on the second watch, knowing all that crap that was going to come up made it so much better and so much easier to deal with. But yeah, so yeah, I mean, you say it's not unwatchable, and you're right, but it is, it's uncomfortable.
I think uncomfortable is the way to put it, and to me, it doesn't bother me to anywhere near that extent. Not because I think it's excusable, but because it is like very old, and like, what do you expect, really? The best way to watch it now is sort of like with a satirical eye of just like, this is so absurd, and the men come across like absolutely batshit. The way they talk about women in this just makes them sound so just weird,
insane.
So that's fun to me, and I find it quite funny in that regard, like unintentionally so. And that's one of the ways that the film's aging has kept it watchable, I think, because it's not. I think there's worse things in other movies, and certainly the Godzilla movies, which are not as old as this, aren't free from this kind of sexism. So yeah, I think you're fair to feel uncomfortable about it, but I wouldn't say that it would be an absolute turn off for anybody. Just watch it with a pinch of salt. Like, this is older than your grandparents' movie here. Expect some problems, but it's fun. I think there's a fun side to just how absurd it is, and it's sad to think that was the norm at any time. But at least we can, even with the, you know, injustices that go on now, we can look at this and say, at least it's not as bad as that. And when the giant ape comes along, it sort of does add an extra layer of like, this is so silly. This is just like, you know. So,
yeah, that's fair. I do like how they actually they did attempt to give the characters some level of development, I suppose. I mean, you could say Driscoll had some character development. You know, he went from hating Anne to then liking her. I'd say that's the extent of his development, frankly. But, you know, you kind of got Anne's backstory, like, which is kind of interesting because at the time it was the Great Depression. So, you know, she probably would have agreed to go on this thing. You know, it probably didn't seem that insane that she would agree to do this.
Wow.
Which I thought was quite interesting. You know, as a product of its time, you know, that's probably didn't seem that strange. And then thinking of another character, you got Kong himself. You know, and I think what separates Kong from being just like a B-movie monster like the Blob or whatever is the fact he's not just a malicious force, you know, bent on destruction.
There is an actual character there.
Yeah, you know, even though he's aggressive, it's like in an animalistic way. And I think that probably, you know, that character that he has behind him is, you know, plays a big part in its longevity. You know?
Because you can see that he's innocent in it. Basically, he's just a creature.
Yeah,
we've said this often in the past
like with Godzilla.
Yeah, the kaijus are often sort of like sucked into a situation that is not their own making, and deal with the consequences of it at the hands of other people, effectively. And that is what happens to Kong, and that sets the framework which all these movies follow, effectively.
I wonder if they made the characters so unlikable just so that Kong would seem a bit nicer.
I think this is the thing, that Carl Denham is villainous for sure, but he never really feels like he is an actual like villain. Like, obviously, he's the main driving force behind the story. Like, he's the one who takes them to Sky Island. He brings Kong back to New York, but that's it. He does two things, and he's nasty. But like, I guess because the filmmakers see themselves in him, he's also sort of portrayed as like this kind of courageous guy who will like do anything.
Yeah.
But at the end, when they have this stage show in New York and Kong is like put on display, and they basically force Ann Darrow to be there.
They really don't give a shit about Kong or Anne.
Yeah, it comes across in sort of like almost a metatextual way that the characters don't really seem that malicious in what they're doing. It's treated so like happenstance. It's just like, well, yeah, she's here. Of course she would be. Yeah. Whereas you really kind of desire a sense of menace from Carl Denham. Like, he kind of wants Kong to get a bit angry or whatever for the crowd. Like, that would be something. And I can't remember exactly how it unfolds in the Peter Jackson remake, but they do it almost scene for scene, and they amp things up to a degree. But yeah, it's this thing of like, you do yearn for more character in the film, but again, it just goes back to like, it is a really good effects action movie, and they know that's what people are looking at. The attention, especially in 33, I think was entirely on what's Kong doing, what's Kong going to do next, and all that acting stuff is just like, it's just framework to get to that point. So it doesn't really matter, even though it's lacking. You can forgive it because of its age, and also the fact that we know the intent of the film is to see Kong, and you do. So
it's an adventure film.
Yeah,
really. Yeah, that's what it is. An adventure film with some pretty good horror, I have to say. It was more graphic than I expected.
Yeah.
Not that, I can say little miniatures and puppets slamming into rocks is graphic, but, the implication is there.
That's a credit to the effects, that they're quite emotive, despite they're quite crude, but you still feel like, people are being eaten and stamped on, and what else happens, it's very effective.
Yeah. There's that one bit where they're being shaken off that log and they fall down the ravine, and they're hitting the rocks down below. Have you ever seen Midsommar?
I haven't, actually.
Okay. Do you think you'll see it?
Probably.
Okay. Well, we'll move on.
There's an interesting.
I'm sure people listening will know what I'm referring to here.
There's some really good sound design in that, though, which is really
when they scream and then it suddenly stops.
It just cuts out.
Yes.
I don't know if that's how sound really works. And when somebody dies, does their screen just like chop off?
I don't care, but it worked so well.
It's very effective.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like very creepy and like, oh yeah, they're definitely dead.
Yeah.
It's all prolonged as well, that sequence, and I'm sure you've read or you know about the bug scenes.
The spider pit.
Yes, this like lost sequence, effectively.
Yes.
So they get shaken off a log into a cavern by Kong, and then when the men are at the bottom, they don't immediately die. They get torn to pieces by a bunch of giant spiders.
Yes.
And this was seen in test screenings of Kong, but audiences found it so distracting or disagreeable that they decided to cut it out. But there's never ever been a negative found of it. No one ever knows where that deleted scene is. It feels like it was destroyed after that test screening, and literally like they just got rid of it, didn't keep any part of it.
Exactly.
But one of the things that it was criticised for was slowing down the pace of the movie. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to go on and on about this because this is not the movie we're talking about, but they reinstate it in the Peter Jackson version.
Not only did they do that,
yeah,
Peter Jackson made it for 1933.
Oh yes.
So they did make it in the 1933 style.
I vaguely remember that. Yeah, they've made like two versions. One is like old-fashioned style for fun kind of thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Have you seen that?
I probably have.
It's good.
I think so.
It's good fun. Because they looked back at, they found like some stills had surfaced of one of the spider creatures, and like the original screenplay was still floating around. and it makes reference to this scene in particular, and like the fact there was another dinosaur chasing them, and that's why they were stuck on the rock. They couldn't go back.
I see.
Yeah, they were stuck there, so and then they got shaken off and fell down into that ravine. But that was really interesting how they did it, because the special effects guy, Willis O'Brien, was so secretive about the production of Kong. Like, there was no interviews with him, and there's no real, no real documentation of any kind about the process. So when they wanted to recreate this spider pit scene, they had basically just had to rewatch the footage and reverse engineer it.
Right.
And that's how they discovered how much actually went into creating the special effects, for this film.
So they've watched the existing like Kong sequences, you mean, and they applied that to this new spider sequence that Peter Jackson directed.
Yes.
Right. Okay.
That's for the fun,
the black and white one. Did they use like Jack Black in that, or did they like try and make it look like?
No, they used the special effects team. They were the actors in it.
Oh, I guess so, because it's not even like any of the named characters from the original King Kong that go through that.
No, it's just the sailors.
Because in the Peter Jackson movie proper is like actually named characters who have to fight off the bugs, so they do it a bit differently. But
right, okay. But yeah, obviously, I mean, that scene was cut. They were saying that there was someone who had seen it. They spoke about it long after.
An easy claim to make there.
Yeah, but what they said was that people laughed unintentionally because
really?
Yeah, because of the googly eyes on the bug.
Right.
But I find that believable, because it's like, why would you cut this? To say it slowed it down.
Maybe these are jumped up reasons to be like, oh yeah, we need to get rid of it. Yeah,
and I reckon it is because people laughed and they're like, oh god, no, this is terrible. Let's just cut it.
Could be any number of reasons, couldn't it?
It could be.
It does sound so by the by there, like, oh, you're running away from Kong, you're terrified, you fall into this pit, and then like there's like 3 or 4 minutes dedicated to a spider fight. Like, you've just introduced Kong into the movie. Even if people laughed at it and that was the true reason it got deleted, like, it is going to kill the pace, because you've already spent nearly an hour building up to Kong as it is, and now you're with him, and now we've got spiders instead. Yeah,
it could be like, well, what's this film about? Is it about the island or is it about Kong?
And that is how it feels in the Peter Jackson version, really.
Oh, right.
But again, could go on and on.
Yeah. I have a theory about Godzilla versus Kong based on this footage. Because that shot when Kong's in the Hollow Earth?
Oh, yeah. And we're talking about the modern movies, though.
The modern one, yeah. And you see that creature that might be Manila.
So the Kong runs across the ground and beats the earth, and the vibrations make little bugs come up, and not Manila eats the bugs.
Yes.
Right?
I think that creature is actually one of the lizards from the pit.
Oh, it's supposed to look like it is.
It looks just like it.
It's got googly eyes.
It doesn't have googly eyes, but it looks the same. Right. When I saw it, I was like, oh, that looks exactly like the Manila-esque creature from Godzilla vs. Kong.
Oh, so you think it's not Manila, it's actually from...
I think it's from this, the 1933 spider pit.
I still feel like it's definitely Manila.
There we go.
But just because if you run yourself through the thought process of the people making that movie, what else are they going to do? I don't know.
Well, I don't know, because you've got the the skull crawlers in Kong Skull Island, 2017. You see one of those in 1933.
Do you?
Yeah. So when they're first escaping Kong and Jack he goes down that vine and hides.
Oh, it's the little creature climbs up the little ledge. And... Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's it. Presumably that's what the skull crawler is based on.
I guess you could say that's the thing of those. Like, if you're working with Kong and you're rebooting Kong for Kong Skull Island, you would look at that original movie for inspiration. And likewise, I feel like with Kong versus
Godzilla versus Kong,
they would be like, we need to get every little Godzilla reference in here we can. So
that's why I think it's the spider pit thing, because it's when Kong's on screen.
Right.
You see. But yeah, I thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, you can see, fun to debate.
But yeah, speaking about the cutout scenes. So when this was re-released over the years, like the censorship literally cut out all of the good scenes.
Yep.
So there were 29 shots in total that were cut out completely. And there was stuff like, you know, the natives getting crushed by the Kong foot, and Darrow getting undressed, people in the ravine. Basically all the good stuff, you know.
The woman gets chucked out of her bed in New York
Yeah,
City.
all of that, all gone. So, I mean, we touched on it before about the Production Code Authority. You know, they had to run things by them. But basically, yeah, so when they came into effect, it was in 1934. They got really strict, and they were like, right, we're having, we're cutting out anything remotely racy or interesting.
Yeah, I wonder who is in charge of this organisation.
I did look it up, and I can't remember who.
Bunch of bloody Christians, I bet.
More than likely. But
it's just thinking, like, because they made King Kong before that code existed, they could do basically whatever they wanted.
Exactly.
And then because it got re-released, and I don't know if this is true, but I've heard that King Kong is the first movie ever to get an official re-release, like new prints were made, kind of thing.
Right.
So yeah, I guess like you're saying, they had to run it through this PCA. I mean, censorship thing, and
yeah, and it
totally changes Kong's character, basically.
Yeah, completely. But I think this could be a podcast in itself, to be honest. Like pre-code cinema, I was looking into it. So basically, like up until 1934, there was films with like homosexuality, interracial relationships, abortion, prostitution, all this kind of stuff.
All the favourites,
all the good stuff. And it's like it's quite. When I think back to that era, I think of it being quite prudent. Yeah. And
PCA is the architect of the modern prudish society we live in, perhaps.
Exactly. And I think they've got a lot to answer for.
Yeah, undoubtedly, yeah. And people more scholared than us could delve into that, I suppose.
Oh, completely, yeah. But yeah, I feel bad for, like, we're saying, like, with the special effects, like Willis O'Brien, because so much of that work was just cut out. And it made me wonder what really was left of the film. I've not seen the 1938 cut version, to be honest. But it'd be sad to lose. I mean, it's
going to be like 20 minutes shorter, basically, isn't it?
It's horrendous. I think that's just absolutely tragic. But
it's all been reinstated.
It's all been reinstated, of course.
If you watch it now, the versions we have, even with mine being nearly 20 years old, it's very much like been restored, and new stuff's been added since, hasn't it? Like over the years they found deleted scenes, and they've put even more back into it that was lost over time. So
So Willis O'Brien, the special effects guy, he was like a pioneer of cinema special effects with like stop motion and puppetry and all that. And it's funny that I thought Ray Harryhausen was. I thought he was the guy.
He was the first guy to do this.
And like it's really kind of showing up gaps in my knowledge here. I had no idea about this guy, Willis O'Brien. And he's the one to thank for, Ray Harryhausen and anyone else that came after. It's like they achieved some amazing stuff, like very complicated shots, like having stop motion and rear projection and matte paintings and compositing it in camera and stuff like that with puppetry. Oh man, it's incredible.
Because there's scenes where like they're doing rear screen production of stop motion dinosaurs like coming towards the sailors and all that they're trying to escape.
Like the Stegosaurus, I think.
Exactly. Yeah. And on set, because of this, not only is the special effect the dinosaur very, very high spec for its era, the way it's filmed is that the actors can see in real time this dinosaur coming towards them.
Yeah.
And that's just like that's better than what we have now. Like they've created the volume now, which is this new like Star Wars tech where they're filming, the Mandalorian and the new Batman movie inside these like high resolution OLED film cave kind of things. So that will sort of bring back this idea of like you can see
you can
the environments you're in, react to it. But the idea that like this movie in 1933 had, effects of this scale, it really is like it is the seminal moment which leads to stuff now like Avatar, stuff like that wouldn't be possible without King Kong. That lineage starts here in many ways. Obviously there are previous special effects movies that you can also tie to that, but this was in a lot of ways like the first of its kind. Yeah,
absolutely. Some of the stuff that like it probably sounds quite simple but that really impressed me was Like how they layered up the jungle. They'd have like panes of glass layered on top of each other to add depth. So like, you know, between the focal point and the camera, foliage would blur and stuff like that. It's because it's on layers of glass and things like that. And it feels weird to call this scene impressive, but the one where Kong is undressing Anne is so cleverly done. Like they filmed Fay Wray in this Kong hand with wires pulling away her clothing.
Yeah.
And then they rear-projected that footage into a stop-motion set where the animators then animated against the footage, frame by frame.
They move it forward one frame at a time. They expose it with the actual photography there, and you get a real live actor scaled down to Kong size.
Exactly.
And that's the odd thing as well, isn't it? The Kong they used is like 18 inches tall.
Yeah.
And then they're making him look like he's, 60 feet or whatever, how tall he's supposed to be.
Yeah.
So it's quite amazing, really.
Yeah, so clever. And they would have fans to keep the film from melting because they're projecting a single frame for a long time to get the shot. And just so many clever ways to do it all. And it's like, honestly, the list of the stuff they did it could just go on and on. Actually, you know, so it just doesn't just talk into a special effects discussion, really. But if anyone hasn't seen any of the special features, get yourself a DVD or a Blu-ray of King Kong out and watch those, because Peter Jackson did produce a making of.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and it's I think it was for the 2005 re-release of 1933.
That isn't the version I have, unfortunately.
Oh, okay. It's well worth a watch. It's very, very good. It's like 2.5 hours, and I sat and watched the whole thing. I thought I was only going to watch a couple, but I just watched the lot, and it's really fascinating.
I bet.
So I saw the Blu-ray scan of this, which was, I think it was scanned in 4K and then restored in 2K. So like the Blu-rays is only up to 2K. But you saw a different version to me, right?
Yes, I have subjugated myself for the purposes of the podcast. Some people may know already about this dark time in cinema history. During the late 80s, I think it was, there was a fad of colorizing black and white movies. And the idea of colorizing a black and white movie has existed for a long time, back in the earliest days of cinema, before color film was invented. Painting color onto each individual frame was considered itself a special effect. You could make color appear in the movie.
George Méliès, he would do that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But yeah, in the 80s, Ted Turner of Turner Broadcasting and, CNN and all that, this media mogul, was looking for a way to make as much money as possible, as they do, and owned the rights to a number of famous black and white movies like Citizen Kane and It's a Wonderful Life and King Kong, and decided that they would be more watchable if they were in colour.
Right.
So went around using what at the time was new technology to digitally colorise the movies. So when I watched King Kong,
it wasn't painted on or anything?
It wasn't painted on. It's done sort of like in a digital fashion.
I see.
And by doing this, it meant that now that the movies were in colour, they could charge more ad revenue for them.
Really?
If you wanted to sell ad space on a movie, you couldn't charge as much for a black and white movie as you could for a colour movie.
Oh my God.
So that is the real reason that they did this. And Ted Turner, as the owner of this company, got a lot of flack for this when it was going on. That it was vandalism, of art or cultural vandalism. That you're putting colour onto these movies. The original creators of these movies have not chosen this or had any oversight of it, and it's known that Ted Turner would revel in this kind of controversy. So I've got a couple of quotes here from Ted Turner.
Let's hear them.
Who said at one time, "I'm really shocked at all the fuss. I personally don't think it makes that much difference in the end. I think editing these movies makes a hell of a lot more difference than how they look." Referencing that you could cut scenes out to put more ads in, basically. So this is a better solution.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Especially when they're chopped up by 20 or more minutes in order to fit in to a time slot. There you go. Why
I think
aren't
that's
people...
fair. That's fair.
I think it's a straw man argument, isn't it? Saying like, oh, we should colorize them because that's better than cutting time out. When really it's like these two things shouldn't they don't go together anyway. You shouldn't be doing either of these things, really, you know.
Right, yeah.
So there you go. And he was so like, besides, I like things in colour. We see in colour. And he is known to have at one time asked reporters to ask him about the colorization because he liked the additional promotion it was creating. Like the fever pitch around the colorization of this movie was most of the promotion that it was getting. So therefore he wanted the controversy to continue. So yeah, I watched King Kong colorized. I've never done this before. I've had the DVD where it is included as a special feature for many, many years. I've never really paid any mind to it, but I've been interested in this notion of colorizing movies for a while. Just as a thing of just like, it's odd. And these days, when you talk about digital colorization, it is a very, very complicated and high-end process. The way Ted Turner's company colorized movies was not to paint by hand, but basically to digitally paint each frame. So it sort of is like sort of splodged on, and there's a reasonable degree of accuracy. Like, it doesn't look like bad, but it does have a childish appearance, not because of the colorization, but mostly because of the limitations of the colors. So when you have a green, that's the green. That is the green. Like,
there are no shades in between.
Exactly.
It's green.
The only sort of shade you get, or if black and white crosses over it. Yeah. So like the shading of the movie might create like literally like a shade of color, but ostensibly like there is just one green, there's one blue, there's one skin tone, there's one red, you know, that like that. So when you're watching this movie, it's extremely distracting because all you can really see is the fact that it's been colorized, and the thing that gets you the most is the skin tones, because all the people, most of the people in this movie are white. They all have the same flesh tone, and obviously then they come to the tribe, and those are black people, and I assume most of the actors are actual black people. I don't know if there's blackface going on in King Kong. Maybe.
I don't think there is, but
I don't think so. Yeah, when you look at it, it does look like it's all actual cast members.
It's kind of weird though. It has black people playing Polynesians.
Yes, and there's another instance of a similar issue in the next movie we'll watch as well,
and the one after that as well.
The point is, like, it looks weird when everybody has the same skin tone. I'm saying like black and white look different, but the brown is the brown and the pink is the pink, and it looks really, really odd. And occasionally, in the case of King Kong and the dinosaurs, they don't color it. So those dinosaurs are the dinosaur, like the Stegosaurus that charges on the sailors, as we were talking about earlier.
Oh, it's just like black. It's just grey.
It's just grayscale, and everything else is colourful. And the jungle is like this fluorescent green, and it's all one green. So the only thing that really stands out is the people, and they have put some thought into it, because they made one particularly clever choice here, which is that all the sailors wear blue shirts by their colorization choice, but Jack Driscoll, though, his shirt is left white, so you can pick him out. Basically, you can see like, oh well, that's the main guy. Fay Wray's dress is pink. In most of the jungle sequence, and it matches the pink that is on the King Kong film poster. So it's like, okay. And then you go back to New York, it's yellow, and I think the prop dress was known to be yellow. Peter Jackson's King Kong shows Ann Darrow in a yellow dress during the New York sequence as well. So I think they sort of know some of the stuff from like maybe documentation or whatever. So it's not completely thoughtless, but the overall point here is that the process is very
artless.
It's heartlessly done. Yeah.
Artless.
Oh, artless. Sorry. Well, yes, it is artless. I think like the actual like the practicality of how it's been done is not like been done that well.
Bit primitive.
Yeah, it feels primitive, or it feels amateurish. Like it doesn't look professional. But yeah, it was difficult to watch because it is persistently distracting, and you find yourself just watching the colorization rather than watching the movie. Yeah. And in the first hour, where you're getting a lot of setup, like they spend a lot of time where Carl Denham's like, oh, we need to make a movie and I need a woman, and they go find a woman, and then they're on the boat, and, you know, oh, I don't like women, oh, but I love you, and all that stuff. You're just thinking about the colour for the most part, and it's hard to actually kind of take in what's happening. And I think that would be the case for most people. Anybody who watches this, whether they saw it on TV in the 1980s or they watched it now, if you know that King Kong is a black and white movie, it's going to be distracting and you're not going to be able to enjoy it. So what's the point? If you're too young, or you just don't know that this movie started out black and white, you would be so perplexed by the artistic choices that it is basically a 7 or 8 color movie.
Yeah.
That is just too distracting. It's a wonderful curiosity.
Yeah.
And I think that Ted Turner's like verbose like kind of justification of it is really entertaining in itself.
Yeah, that is funny. I love that.
And, you know, it is in a way artistic vandalism, and I'm glad that the moment's passed and people saw sense and were just like, nobody liked it. Famously, George Lucas spoke to the American Congress about how this shouldn't be allowed. And that argument's been used against Lucas himself.
Yeah, surely.
But on the DVD, when I pressed play, and I sent you a picture of this, didn't I? Where the film starts and it basically says to you in this, like, there's a bit of text at the beginning which says like, yeah, we did this and no one wanted us to. But here you go. It's not quite as casual as that, but it says something like...
That's the general sense, though.
Hold on a second, I'll find it. So it says at the beginning, this is a colorized version of a film originally marketed and distributed in black and white. It has been altered without the participation of the principal director, screenwriters, and other creators of the original film. And I can't remember if that precedes or follows a very ostentatious Ted Turner logo that comes out and like animates and spins around. It was like really, very entertaining. But I mean, it looks atrocious, but it is very interesting.
I want to see this one. I'll swap you my Blu-ray, then you can watch those special features, and I'll watch the colorized.
Yeah, good call. I would do that. The scan I have on my DVD is clearly from a broadcast cassette, which has been played a lot. So there's a few little moments where like the tape like breaks up. It's just been like it's in the transfer. It's just like that's just the way it is.
Oh Christ! It's interesting though because even though it's artless and clunky and egregious in many ways, it could introduce people to something interesting. So a lot of people might not care if it looks bad. They're just like, well, I don't want to watch anything black and white. I mean, my partner and I, we watched. Obviously seen Night of the Living Dead a lot of times, and that's in black and white, the original one. Mm-hmm. And my partner, she wasn't interested in seeing it. She doesn't like black and white movies, generally speaking. So we watched the colorized version.
Ooh.
I was like, oh, there's a colorized version.
How is that done?
I think it must be painted on. It looks it looks okay. You know, it's fine. There's nothing to write home about. You know, it's done well enough. It looks exactly like other colorizations I've seen, so it didn't take me by surprise. But it was good that there was an option there, at least, you know, so that we could both watch, you know, and introduce her into the franchise. I mean, I don't think she was that keen on the film anyway.
When something is black and white, it does have it has a steeper hill to climb, I think, to get all of my attention. And I do like black and white movies, but if a movie doesn't catch my interest and it's black and white, then I'm more likely, as your partner is, to be like, you know what?
Yeah. So I think that argument is there for a colorized version. Okay, let's talk a bit about the sound of the music. So there's lots of claims that the composer, Max Steiner, so this is like apparently the first American feature-length film to have a thematic score and not just background music, which I don't think is actually true, but the way he did it was like, you know, he could compose specific cues for characters. So Kong would have his own melody, Anne would have hers, and so on.
Right.
And I didn't notice this. I just read this. I'll read it verbatim. But after the death of King Kong, the Kong theme and the Fay Wray theme converge, underlining the Beauty and the Beast type relationship. Which I didn't spot that, but I mean, very clever. That's very clever composing there. And so the claim is that this guy laid the groundwork for...
Invented this concept, basically.
Yeah. But it's kind of weird because in silent movies, you'd have this kind of... in operas, you'd have this... It's called a leitmotif, where you'd have characters have their own music. Mm-hmm. And in silent movies, you know, they would have music throughout, and it's kind of played in rhythm with whatever's happening on screen. So this whole idea is not his own, but I think it's the amalgamation of all of these ideas into one cohesive soundtrack. Yeah,
it's like this is the first time it was printed on the film as a talk, as it were. They broke new ground in that sense, but it's still building upon an existing concept to it.
Exactly, yeah. Which I think is actually quite interesting.
Yes, it's still pioneering in its way. Definitely.
Yeah. And Arrow's theme is actually quite a versatile piece because it can be romantic and kind of, floaty sounding. And then with some adjustments, it can build and be quite dramatic and suspenseful. It's just very clever scoring. And the sound designer was Murray Spivak. And I think like he and the composer worked together quite closely. And, he would say that he would he would lower his sound effects to make way for, bigger pieces of music and stuff like that. So like there's parts where Jack's trying to stab Kong's hand when he's trying to reach for him.
That's all music.
It's all music there, yeah. Things like that. It's just, I think it's quite fun the way they did it, kind of playing around with sound and music together to make a movie. And it's quite cool. But I'm always interested in the roars that they do for these films because they always they have this sort of uncanny valley sort of thing to them, because a lot of the time, back then, sound design, you'd be using existing sounds. You wouldn't use synthesizers because that stuff didn't exist. So like for Kong's roar, he would use a lion's roar and then a tiger's roar played backwards, combined them and slowed them down to make Kong's roar. The T-Rex's hiss was like a puma roar and compressed air. And the Brontosaurus was he was grunting into a double chambered gourd, which is like a squash. I love all that stuff.
Yeah,
always love that stuff. So anyway, did you have a favorite moment from this film?
I really like when Kong first escapes out of the theatre in New York and he's looking for Anne, and some poor woman just gets mistaken for Anne, and then he climbs up part of a building and reaches in to this lady's bedroom and yanks her out of bed, and presumably having been asleep, she probably has no knowledge of Kong as a creature. So just imagine that waking up to this experience, how that would feel. And he's like, oh, it's not Anne, Darren. He basically just drops her to her death. And the effects are very well executed. And I think it's great because it shows Kong's character and all the effects just work in tandem. You've got the giant hand they built grabbing her out of the bed, and the stop motion with the woman in Kong's hand while he's coming out of the building. And then they do this like dolly sort of pull away where they filmed the woman like flailing, and they like pull the camera back really, really far, and then they've composited that over the aerial shot of a city street, so it looks like she's falling like into the street. So loads of effects going on, kind of horrific, but sort of there's a comedic edge to this scene. And it's all coming together, and that's what's great about King Kong, is it is the marriage of so many different things working together very, very well. Obviously, we've covered some of its weaknesses in its screenplay, which I think go without saying for the most part. But when the action gets going, and the special effects are firing on all cylinders, there's too many favorite moments to choose from, really. But I really like that because it's not just a great special effect, but it's a really great character moment, and it sticks in your mind because of like the horror that it impresses upon you. Yep,
that's a good one. Mine is just after that. It's where
the train thing.
No, it's like no, right after. So he carries on climbing up, and then it cuts to Anne Darrow's room.
It's the same bedroom.
Well, yeah, it is really. But
it's the same set. I mean,
Jack says, so it's like, don't worry, it's all over now. And like Kong's looking through the window.
He's outside. Yeah, he's looking through the window.
I was just like cracking up.
How would they not have heard like the sound of a creature like bashing his way up the building? It's just like, and why do they? I don't know. Like, he's no good at protecting her. Like, I know, like, sexism and she shouldn't need protecting and blah 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 whatever. But like, if he's
she's proven she can take a hit to the face.
Well, yes. If he's employed himself to protect this woman, and he's like, Kong's escaped. Kong's looking for Anne. Let's just go back to like the nearest. We'll go back to the hotel that we're staying in, which is next to the theatre. And we'll just wait it out, I guess. It's like, no, just like hop in a car and like fucking go. Like, get out of New York City.
There's this...
It's just wild. It's crazy how crappy he is at being a boyfriend.
There's this trend in King Kong where people think, if I ascend, I'll be safe. So
why would you
the sailors running away from the Brontosaurus. One of the ones that was lagging behind is like, I'm going to climb up this tree.
I'm going to climb this tree to just about mouth height.
Mouth height, gets chewed to pieces. They climb up, they go into their hotel. Kong's there, ready for him. And then Kong tries escaping up the Empire State Building.
Yeah, he's guilty of it as well.
Guys, come on. Go underground if you're going to do something.
That's something about this film that I think is it's hard to appreciate this these days. I know we have, big architectural achievements like the Burj Khalifa is like currently the tallest building in the world in Dubai and all of that, and they put that in a Mission Impossible movie, but that is not the cultural impact of Kong climbing the Empire State Building, right? And the fact that the Empire State Building was only a couple of years old when they did this. Yeah, I
think it was 5 years old.
It's like immediately this cultural icon, like globally recognizable. Like they've made this obscenely massive building for its time, and I really love that pairing of just like they've become inseparable. Like culturally, there are two great symbols that like go together and can also stand apart. And I think that as far as New York being used as the default location for so many movies, that is all indebted to Kong climbing the Empire State Building, basically.
Absolutely, yeah. Okay, I've made a little quiz.
Oh, I love a quiz.
Yeah, it's becoming a regular. Okay, so it's only 4 questions.
Okay.
I found it quite difficult to do a quiz because so much of the movie, there's so much known about it.
We'll test that theory.
Yeah, we'll see. Okay, so question number 1. The 1938 re-release trailer tagline. What was it? Was it A, the mighty monarch of all melodramas? B, from Skull Mountain to the silver screen? Or C, Hail to the King?
I think I actually watched this trailer yesterday. Because there was a trailer on my DVD and I was like, oh yeah, watch it. And I was like, this doesn't feel 1933 to me. It felt like the character and the notion of King Kong as a movie was already established, it felt like in the trailer.
Yeah.
So I think, based on what I watched, it was Hail to the King.
Incorrect.
Oh,
it was the first one.
Mighty Monarch.
Of all melodramas.
One or the other. They wouldn't repeat King, would they, in the tagline if it's in the title?
No, yeah. So not a great third option. Well, whatever.
I should have caught it, is what you're saying.
Yeah, I think you should have caught that. But apparently, the original trailer no longer exists in any form. So like the earliest trailer is that 1938 re-release, which is why it's included everywhere.
Probably got burned up at some point.
Well, apparently Cooper liked to do that. He was like, oh, if this isn't being used, it's going in the furnace. Why
though? Because it's taking up space. I guess they have to pay for the storage.
I think it was quite a common practice then, yeah. Which is sad from an archival aspect.
I mean, they are a fire hazard as well. It's not just that they are susceptible to being burned. It's like if the celluloid catches fire, your whole studio could go down. So why would you keep excess amounts of it around, I suppose?
Yeah, true. Okay, question 2. What was the kill count? Was it 55?
55.
65? Or 75?
These are higher numbers than I thought. Are we saying that everybody in that train died?
I think it included people in the train, yes. You're testing me now.
He downs one plane, if I recall. Just that's 2 people.
We're going through scene by scene. Okay.
Well, just trying to. How is it even 55? I guess he crushes a lot of people in the village. I'm going to say it's 65.
Correct.
Yeah.
So this does include the people that fell down the ravine into the spider pit.
Yeah, of course. But he still causes it. He still shakes the log.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, this also includes animals. Yeah, people being killed by dinosaurs as well.
Okay. Like it's not just Kong then.
It's not just Kong. Yeah. So I did read somewhere else. Someone else said 40, but I looked at a list that listed every single kill, who they were and what they were killed by, and it was 65. So we'll go with that.
I was looking at James Bond kill counts recently for another purpose.
Right.
It just skyrockets as soon as it becomes Pierce Brosnan. It goes from maybe 10 at a high count for a movie would be about 10, and then it's just 27. And it gets worse from there, into the Daniel Craig era. The kill count on Bond is just going up and up and up.
Is it higher still? Oh, yes. I imagine the 90s, early noughties, that was just guns a go-go.
I would have thought that it would have started off high and then gone down. But I think
they were quite slow-paced.
With James Bond movies, a lot of people die, but it's not always Bond that's doing the killing. That's the thing.
These are the ones that die at Bond's hand.
I think it's purely James Bond did the deed is the thing. But
Jesus.
This is off topic. But
Okay, question 3. How many weeks did production take? Was it 55 weeks, 65 weeks, or 75 weeks?
50 weeks, 55 weeks, what you said.
Yeah, you're correct, yeah.
So it's a long time.
It was a long time. And
most of that is animation, obviously, right?
Yes, that's right. A lot of it, I mean, that doesn't include any of the pre-production. So it was a lot of work. Although they managed to pump out a sequel the same year.
Same as Godzilla, more or less, really, isn't it?
Yeah, so that'll be interesting when we watch that one.
Are we doing that?
Well, we'll see. We'll see. I assumed we would at some stage.
I guess it depends how long we do this for,
Yeah. If anyone's listening and you want to hear us cover it, or if you really don't want to hear us cover it, let us know.
We have a problem with being overly negative on this podcast, but needless to say, I am gagging to rip this 2005 King Kong movie to shreds. I saw a bit of it recently, and I was just like flabbergasted by how trash it is.
That's such a shame.
Speaking as a religious Peter Jackson defender,
and I mean Peter Jackson himself, obviously a huge Kong fan, so it's quite a sad state of affairs there.
Yeah, I mean, again, another day.
Yeah. Okay, question 4. Where did Cooper and Schoedsack cameo in the film? Was
They're
it
pilots in the planes?
Oh, let me read my other answers.
Well, what were your booby trap answers then?
Passengers on the train that Kong attacked.
Right.
Reporters backstage at the Kong reveal.
Yeah.
Or pilots on one of the planes.
You could have gone really dark and been like, oh, were they in the tribe?
Well, that was one of my initial ones, and I was like, I'm not treading that ground.
That would be a horrible thing to say.
Yes, so I didn't do that.
Okay.
I thought they were quite... If you didn't already know, I think that you might have struggled with that one.
I thought it's a fair guess, I think, isn't it? But yeah, you're right. I was lucky to already know.
Yeah, and Peter Jackson did the same thing for his cameo in the
He's in all his movies, yeah.
But like he did the same cameo, as in he was a pilot.
Yes, yeah, he's in the same spot, you mean? Yeah.
Yes. Right.
Is that all the questions?
Yeah, that's all the questions. So how many did you get? Wait, you got
2?
3 out of 4.
All right.
Well done.
Truly the king of Kong.
Yes, you are. Yeah, well done. That's very good. How did you know the cameo?
I've just heard it somewhere, I think.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's just a kind of fact. You know, like if a director's going to have a cameo in a film, the next step is telling everybody, right? So, come on.
Yeah. Right. So I guess overall thoughts
on King Kong.
Yeah. So I'm going to get the negatives out of the way. I mean, we've already covered them. You know, there's fundamental problems which I hate. You know, worshipping at the altar of the Western white, beautiful blonde, the over-the-top sexism, the unlikable characters. And maybe I'm overstretching here when we're talking about the code stuff. But I feel like for re-releases of this film, and I think any film now, there should be some sort of categorization for like misogyny and sexism. In the same way you have like, bad language or horror or racism. Mm-hmm. I feel like there should be something there because like even though it is a product of its time, I think that's not as it is now. There should be something to say to people. Yeah, this is a depiction of what was culturally okay at the time, and it isn't now. And because like I said, I found it so off-putting and frustrating to watch.
Right.
I imagine most women will just roll their eyes at it because it's something they have to put up with it on the daily anyway. So it probably rolls off their back. But I found it really, really frustrating.
I think that's absolutely fair because you don't want any of this behaviour to be emulated or treated as like the norm these days.
So I mean, I'm not saying
we're not saying that anybody should alter the movie or change it. It should definitely be kept as it is.
Yes,
and enjoyed as it is. It's just maybe you want to say beforehand, like, look, this is a bit crusty, and enjoy.
Yeah, just make it clear that it's in there.
Totally.
But yeah. Also, the other negative was the confusing message at the end, which with the beauty, it was beauty killed the beast. That. Like I said, total misfire for me and didn't really, I don't know, it didn't gel with the rest of the movie, in my opinion.
I think it's...
Maybe I'm getting too hung up on little parts, to be honest. I think, like we're saying, we shit on a lot of stuff and maybe I'm being too brutal to some of the aspects of this that are just they're meant to sound fun. They're just meant to sound interesting rather than have any real depth to it. But it's just weird what a confusing message it left for me at the end, I think.
I think it comes from the wrong place that again, this speaks to the time, but Carl Denham gets his final say. Literally, it's the last line of the movie, rather than any kind of comeuppance. When really you feel like it should be Anne Darrow who gets to have the final say on her relationship with Kong and what's happened, or does Anne Darrow dislike Kong? Does she feel like Kong is the problem, or does she dislike Carl Denham? And again, this is something that they've dealt with in the remakes in various different ways, which is a positive change. I think that's why it's hard to take, because you're just like, what, we're supposed to take this kind of poetic, romantic sort of conclusion, and not romantic in the love life sense, but romantic in sort of like, the grand poems sort of thing,
like romanticized style.
And the delivery of it just feels like it's very performative and sort of it's not as grand as it thinks it is. And I do, as we said before, dislike sort of like the reverence that it's earned, because although the movie is, in my opinion, a masterpiece of special effects, it is not a masterpiece of writing. And I would much rather call a spade and say, like, this is a duff conclusion.
Yeah.
Which is it is to me. Like, it really is a bizarre line that you have to reach to give meaning to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a fair criticism, I think, that this famous quote is actually kind of crap.
Yeah. Despite all that, I want to say it's a film of firsts, but it's not technically. But it's the first to combine a lot of, techniques from like the music, the sound effects, the special effects, puppetry and stuff like that. And obviously this being the first giant monster film. I mean, this movie is the reason we're doing this podcast today, really. It's the reason for Godzilla. It's, so it didn't just like use known techniques, but like through innovation, transform them into, some of the most impressive techniques for their time. Yeah. And I think it can still be marveled at today. And I think the sheer amount of genius and labor that went into creating it really did earn its place in history and laid the groundwork for mainstream cinema as we know it today. And that can't be understated. Even though there's all that stuff that I really had a problem with, it was a lot of fun. Like, even though it takes 45 minutes for Kong to show up, you kind of have to sit through all that terrible dialogue. The anticipation's there, and when the action gets going, it really gets going and doesn't stop.
No, and it's very consistent. Once it picks up, it's like now you've earned this enjoyment, basically. Yeah,
and that's something which a lot of movies could learn from, even today. I think.
Like Godzilla 2014, for example.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, exactly. I think maybe, Kong 2005 as well, maybe. I think there's so much to be heralded there. And I think, the praise it gets is absolutely worthy. It really is an incredible film, despite the stuff.
I think it's so easily taken for granted, but when you think that they made this movie 90 years ago, and effectively they're still making it now, like movies are this movie, like there's the structure of it is still the same, and its cultural kind of currency has not devalued at all in nearly 100 years.
Yeah.
So it really can't be taken for granted how important King Kong is as a piece of modern culture. You often hear things like, if you go to the farthest reaches of the world, there are children living in huts, but they know who Mickey Mouse is, and sensationalist statements like this often get bandied around as some sort of meaningful statistic on how popular certain characters are, like Pikachu or Super Mario and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I really do feel like you could ask pretty much anybody in the world about King Kong or Godzilla, and they would know exactly what you were talking about.
Absolutely. Yeah. Icon. Absolute icon.
The definition. Like, criticize the movie all you like, but like, it is the definition of a masterpiece, like literally.
Yeah.
It is the blueprint that we still do movies by now. So
Yep. So we always say about, can newcomers come to this? I mean, we apply this to Godzilla, really. Don't know if this really applies to Kong.
But I guess if you were saying if you'd watched the MonsterVerse movies that come out recently and you were interested, should you or would you watch this, I suppose? Same sort of question.
Yeah, and I think, yes, watch it,
Yeah, definitely.
As dated as it is, doesn't matter.
Yeah, despite the slow the opening act, it's still like really entertaining, and taken with a pinch of salt, as you said about the sexism, a little bit of warning going into it that it's to be mocked in a way to an extent for that.
Yeah.
It's still really, really good and not to be missed. Any cinema fan should watch this regardless of their interest in kaiju movies, really.
Yep. There we go. That's that. King Kong, 1933. Great movie. Okay, so time for the next section. We've got Kaiju Corner. Now, this is for anyone who doesn't know. We've done this a couple of times now, but this is why don't you tell us, Graham? Why don't you tell us what this section is?
It's an additional segment of the podcast which allows us to branch out beyond purely movies. Because obviously we're talking about Godzilla's movie history, but being the cultural icons that Godzilla and of course King Kong are, they pop up quite a bit. Godzilla himself is not what you would call a public domain property, but giant lizard, you see it around. And King Kong, nobody actually owns King Kong as a character anymore. You can put King Kong on a t-shirt and you can sell it and nobody can tell you no. So they're everywhere, these characters. So we wouldn't want to limit ourselves to just the movies. So that's what we've got. Kaiju category for talking about, the wider reach of our favourite characters outside of the movies.
Exactly. So on the last episode, I mentioned that there was something I wanted to cover, but there was some kind of newsy stuff, so I covered that instead. So I pushed it back to this episode. So the thing I wanted to cover was a video game called Attack of the Friday Monsters, A Tokyo Tale. And it's a 3DS game that came out nearly 10 years ago now, in 2013.
And this is news, you say?
No, this isn't news. On the last episode, we covered kind of a newsy thing, with the Call of Duty game and blah, blah, blah. This is not news. This is
This is history.
So old. This is history. But I was talking about how, I was disappointed at the lack of decent kaiju games.
Oh.
Now, so this game is a niche of gaming that very rarely leaves Japan.
Oh, yeah.
And I bought it when it came out. And I really had to have a refresher on this because it had been so long since I played it. But this game, it's set in the 70s, and it's about this boy you play as, Sota, and you're on summer holiday in your new hometown, which I'm guessing is this little village just outside of Tokyo. Mm-hmm. But there's something weird going on in the town. Every Friday, these kaijus and giant mechs appear in the village, and they battle each other. And you need to solve the mystery of why it's happening by speaking to your friends and speaking to the townspeople, and that's the core of the game. There's some other gameplay elements, like you collect these kaiju trading cards and you battle them with the other kids, and if you win, you become their master. Not in any real significant way, but in a I'm the king of the castle kind of way.
All right.
Now the story's very strange. So I'm treading on spoiler territory here. I won't spoil the ending, but basically in this village there's a TV station, and it produces this tokusatsu kaiju show that the kids watch on TV. And it's kind of implied that all the kids have this overactive imagination, and they think that the kaijus are real when they're just filming this show. There's more to it at the end. It gets very weird and ambiguous, and I'm not really sure. I'm not even sure on what the ending is, to be honest. It's very strange. But the bulk of the game is that. Now, it's one of these slice of life games that I wish there were more of in the West, because it's from this guy called Kaz Ayabe, who produced this series of games called Boku no Natsuyasumi, which means my summer vacation. And you play as this kid on summer holiday collecting bugs and stuff. And that.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of this.
Yes, okay. And I always wanted to play them, but they've never been translated or released here. So having this Attack of the Friday Monsters was a great little treat for me. It was a cross between that and kaijus. So that was a nice little thing. But this guy has released a new game recently with a disgustingly long title. It's Shin-chan, Me and the Professor on Summer Vacation, The Endless 7-Day Journey. Yes, he did that.
Oh yeah, I'm going to get that at some point. It looks really good.
So the majority of the team that did Attack of the Friday Monsters did that game as well.
This is news.
Yeah, this is news, and so it's good timing. Yeah, I've not got it yet either. I will at some stage.
I saw the comparisons between that and this other sort of, childhood adventure game you mentioned before. I didn't realise there was a Friday Monsters link either.
Yeah.
It looks quality, so I'm sure Friday Monsters. I think you've shown me this game up.
I think I had, many years ago. But what's so great about it is the nostalgia, and I don't just mean in a remember the NES, remember the 80s kind of way. But it was a nostalgic in a way. It doesn't make me nostalgic for a life I never had. So I didn't grow up in Japan in the 70s, obviously. Right. But as kids, universally, we have, shared emotions and similar experiences of friendship and summer holidays and playing
the notion of childhood, basically.
Exactly. Right? Yeah. Playing silly games with each other. And this game captures that. I want to say perfectly. It's just so it has this, because of the ending as well. It's almost kind of open-ended. It almost has this, when you're a kid, summer holidays felt like they went on forever. It has that feeling. It's just, it's one of my favorite 3DS games. As short as it is, it's only a few hours long, really. And in a way, it's quite uneventful. But I really recommend, if it appeals to anyone listening, it's worth getting. And get it now before the Nintendo 3DS eShop closes, because once that closes, it's gone for good.
Is it digital only?
Digital only, yeah. So if you're curious,
you've got till March next year basically to download that.
Yes, so March 2023.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's if that appeals to you, I would say give it a go. It's pretty cheap. It's part of this collection of games. I think it's called Guild 02. I think because they've done a couple of these collections where they released these short, almost I think experimental kind of games under this banner. And this was one of them. I had one of the other ones as well. It's called Starship Damray, which is quite good, kind of a horror game. But this is they're all very different, and this one is like those summer vacation games. So, but yeah, as it had a kaiju link in there, I thought it was a perfect one to bring into the perfect one to mix into the kaiju curry. Delicious. So yeah, that's my one. I think it's, if you're interested, Graham, I would say give it a go.
I might do.
Have a look at some videos, see what you think on YouTube, and then
maybe I will. Maybe.
Yeah.
I have a literal Kaiju Corner, actually.
Literal? Oh, okay.
Recently, I was privileged to go on a holiday to New York.
Yay.
And I went up the Empire State Building because I appreciate a good observation deck. And even though I know people say, you should go to other places where you can get a view of the Empire State Building,
you wanted to be Kong.
I want to go where Kong went, and I've been once before several years ago, and now I wanted to go again because they've renovated the highest point of the observation deck. Now they've got floor to ceiling windows in the when you go to the 102nd floor.
Yep.
It's just like you get this panoramic view of no obstruction. It used to be like a kind of little sort of the windows were much smaller, and they were kind of difficulty looking through them. So since they've changed it, we thought, we'll go again, and we'll have some nostalgia for ourselves. But when you go up the Empire State Building these days, they have a little sort of King Kong exhibit. So there's some history sort of about sort of how the movie was made. Not much, but basically just saying this is how it was made, and just some little sort of side notes. But there's pictures of the scenes of this is King Kong going up the building, and here's some posters and stuff, and you can stop and have your photograph taken inside a King Kong hand, which is fun. So
did you do that?
Sorry,
did you do that?
I did not do that.
Oh,
I didn't. When you go in, all of the sort of thoroughfare from the starting point of the kind of the queue up to the point where you get to the observation deck, they've got little kind of distractions. Like there's a room where they have video screens all around you, and it's all the media that the Empire State Building has been featured in. They've got stuff from as recent as that Spider-Man PlayStation game, which has just come out on PC. They've got video of that on the wall. and then it goes all the way back, like King Kong. So it's very much like, this is the history of the building, and they've got like King Kong merchandise in the shop and all this, but we didn't really stop and look at that stuff because we wanted to just get up and enjoy the view when it wasn't too busy.
You weren't wearing your pink and arrow dress, and it just would have looked silly being in Kong's hand without it.
Another time. But it was rammed. Like, the queue to go and sit in King Kong's hand was large. And it's interesting, actually, because when you sit in King Kong's hand, basically it's laid out so that his hand is like coming into the Empire State Building, and you can sort of sit in it. And then there's 4 windows around the hand, and one of those windows is covered by like a sticker of King Kong's face, so he's like outside the building looking in.
Yeah.
And I think through those other uncovered windows, you do get an unobstructed view of the literal New York skyline, so that's quite cool.
Oh, cool.
So yeah, it is a good photo opportunity, but
nice.
I had better things to do, so I didn't do it.
No.
But it, like I say, it is in the corner of a room, so it is a literal corner.
I wonder how many people having their picture in the hand have seen a King Kong film.
I imagine quite a few have seen these recent ones, right?
Probably, yeah.
So yeah, fair amount. Interesting that they've never done New York in this monsterverse that they just went through. I don't know if they're going to make another movie now, but maybe they feel like, oh, that's like they've done that.
It's done,
that territory's, it's well worn.
Yeah.
Tokyo's the same, but maybe if they feel like they're going to do a big finale in this next movie, maybe they'll be like, oh yeah, New York, whatever. Who knows?
I hope not.
No, you don't want that?
No, it's been done.
I guess so, yeah. And the kaijus are almost like too big for those buildings in a way.
Yeah.
But we could do a separate conversation about this, but I feel like a globe-trotting kaiju, monster fest, it should be kind of one of the things they're trying to do in the new movies. They show more traversal, as it were.
I suppose they did do a bit of that in 2019, King of the Monsters. Yeah.
Oh yeah, and Kong vs Godzilla as well does some, I think, in a fair way.
Yeah.
So they'll run out of locations eventually. It's not.
Come on, London, for God's sake.
That's the thing. It doesn't have the kind of the verticality that you need in a way, does it?
No. But, you got the shard, and that's kind of it.
It would still be fun though.
Yeah, I'd love to see it. Watch my house get crushed.
Go for it.
Okay, that's a cool one. When I went to New York, we didn't go up the Empire State. We did the other thing, the top of the rock, and looked at the Empire State. So all the the King Kong stuff I never got to see.
It was nowhere near as robust when I went in 2014. Like, they had like a little bit, they're like a same corner. It was like, oh, here's a poster, and like, King Kong, remember him?
Yeah.
And they've beefed it up quite a bit. Like, the whole experience is much more enhanced now from top to bottom. Like, it's more of an event to go to the Empire.
That's
and
cool.
Maybe they're trying to compete because they've obviously, the top of the rock has always had that. Like, you can see the Empire, so go there instead, sort of value to it. But they've also just opened a few other observation decks in New York, which are very... they're really, really modern. Like, you can go to one hang off the edge of a building now.
Oh my God.
All kinds of weird things. So they're really trying to push it so that people go to the Empire instead. But yeah, I just like this thing that, like, in terms of tallest buildings, it's like the original sort of one in a way. I know the Chrysler was taller for a little bit, but in terms of like the cultural impact of a tallest building, Empire State Building is the one. So I like to go to the actual place and be like, oh, here I am.
Yeah, that's cool.
It's like it's more historic to me than these modern buildings that have just been built,
Yeah.
So that's...
Yeah. Is that what...
But what I was going to say but even though they've revamped it and they put more Kong in Empire State Building, I feel like New York as a whole could make more of Kong generally. I'm surprised they don't push Kong in your face more. Like,
yeah, like in this, like when we went to Tokyo where they had the giant Godzilla head.
Yeah.
Why is there not something like that somewhere?
Make a giant Kong somewhere in New York that was like Kong size.
Yeah.
Just a nice photo op. Just do it. Like,
Can't be that hard.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah. I guess is that where you got you got me a Kong Christmas decoration? Was that where you got it from?
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Cool.
Yeah, I wanted to get the Kong mug, but they were sold out of Kong mugs.
Oh boo. You got your Godzilla mug now from me from my
I do
Yokocho tobacco,
and I'm drinking from it right now.
How about that, eh?
Delicious.
Okay, cool. So yeah, that's that then.
What's next?
That's it. We're done. I think that.
What's next for Monster Island Radio?
Oh, that's what you mean. What's next for Monster Island Radio? We're going to be doing King Kong versus Godzilla.
Great.
So was it 1963?
Yes.
62? Something like that. I can't remember now.
Something like that. Yeah.
Something like that. Yes, so that's why we did this one, obviously. In the lead up to that, I'm looking forward to this one because that was a fun film, and I've not seen it since we watched it together many years ago. So that'll be good.
Interesting to hear after seeing all these movies, the modern redone one, and King Kong, obviously.
Yeah. So yeah, that's that. A bit of a waffly chat. Like I said, I found it difficult to talk about such a well-known film and have it feel like there's some stone unturned. But it's a difficult thing to talk about, I think. But hopefully it was entertaining enough for everyone listening. Hopefully you learned something. I don't know. But please continue to message us or comment. We love hearing from you all. Don't be afraid to let us know if you think we're full of shit. You can open our eyes to something we've overlooked. I think that's it. So socials. Where can people find you, Graham?
I occasionally post a video on Fossil Arcade on YouTube, which is a video game, like retro video game thing that I do. So go have a look if you like that sort of thing. Still yet to cover any Kaiju or Godzilla related games. So I
feel like it's coming at some point.
Maybe.
In some way. I don't know. We'll see.
Biding my time.
Yeah. For myself, if you want to see my drawings, I post them on Instagram at BenMRHall. This podcast has an Instagram, Monster Island Radio, and on Twitter it's Monster Island RP. Feel free to talk to us, guys. Anything else, Graham? Have we covered everything?
I think we've covered it. We really love it, and just hungry for more.
Yeah. Cool. Right then. Okay, until the next one, everyone. Bye bye.